And that brings me to breaking news that was reported today. This is how this will impact all of us. And this is the option that Iran warned about as well, that I think all of us was hoping that they would not use. And that's this one. And for people who say foreign policy doesn't have an impact on their life, well, here's an example to show you that it does. Iran reportedly moves to shut Strait of Hormuz after US attacks. This is the one that I think a lot of us were really afraid would happen, because I'm telling you guys right now, I'm about to send the warning. If you think that gas prices are high now, I know some of you live in California, for example, and gas is just always pretty much high there anyway. But if you think that gas prices are high now, the price of oil is already increasing. I want you to see this clip here about why this Strait of Hormuz is so important and why it could impact you.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most geopolitically charged waterways on the planet. Empires fought for it, now global markets depend on it, and at its narrowest point, it's only about 20 to 30 miles wide. Yet, 1/5 of the world's global oil supply flows through it daily. As you can see, there's Iran to the north, and there's the Musandam Peninsula to the south, which is a little exclave of Oman. It's quite tiny here on the map, but you have beady eyes, I've noticed, that juts out from UAE territory. So this narrow throat is the only maritime exit from the Persian Gulf, meaning that there's no other sea route for the vast energy exports of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain. So it connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, to the Arabian Sea, and then if the whiteboard was massive, the Indian Ocean. So it's linking Asia, the Middle East, and the global economy. As you might guess, this strait has been contested for millennia by the early Alamites of ancient Iran, the first Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great, Portuguese naval powers, the Ottomans, the Safavids. They all were seeking to control this vital trade artery between East and West. And today, Iran holds tactical control of this northern coast. And just days ago, a senior Iranian commander warned that Tehran was considering closing the strait in response to Israeli strikes. Iran correctly sees Hormuz as ultimate strategic leverage, not to strike Israel directly, but to pressure the global order. So if cornered by Israeli action or Western backing, it can threaten a blockade, which would cripple oil markets and punish Israel's allies. So it would force the US, Europe, and the Gulf states to make a choice: pressure Israel to back down, escalate militarily, or absorb the economic pain. So would Iran follow through on this? Well, it's an extreme scenario, and its feasibility is debated. Plus, closing this strait would hurt Iran's own exports. It would strain its ties with China, it would risk US escalation, but the threat of this alone was enough to shock markets, understandably as well, because it would send oil prices and inflation soaring. It would disrupt currencies and shipping lanes, and also the flow of food, medicine, and basic goods, which also come through here.
Hormuz, my apologies, guys. I think I said Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz. This is the part I think that we were also warning people about, Danny. The price of oil has already started to increase. And I'm just trying to warn people, you have to realize how much oil Iran controls. And yeah, that would impact us here in the United States. You're talking about prices skyrocketing.
Yeah, and that would inevitably happen to a scale $100 a barrel plus, something absolutely out of control and catastrophic should there be a full-scale war. And now the decision has not yet been, I don't think, fully made by Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz. I believe that that decision lays at the highest body of Iran's government to decide, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But should it happen, indeed, it would hurt everybody. And some have been talking about how it could hurt China. And you even have Marco Rubio say, hey, China, then the United States always does this. China, do this. China, do that for us. Lecturing China to essentially do the United States' dirty work and say, well, this will, this is going to hurt you the most. And indeed, it might have a negative impact on China, especially in the immediate sense. But we also have to remember what happened in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea during Yemen's blockade there. What ended up happening is that Yemen, Ansar Allah, gave permission for Chinese shipping to do business in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait because they didn't see China as associated with this. So it's unclear whether Iran, and of course, I'm not an expert on the dynamics of how the Strait of Hormuz, works in full, but Iran and China have a deep strategic partnership economically, in particular, a 20-plus-year cooperation agreement, which is not going to stop. And oil trade that's done between Iran and China is done in their own respective currencies. So it'd be very interesting to see how China responds to this. One thing that China can do, though, is because it's manufacturing based, it's economic powerhouse of an economy. Manufacturing economy is so important to the world. It might be able to just redivert its oil trade to other countries as it waits out whatever Iran sees itself as needing to do at this time. But it's truly an interesting moment because even though the United States and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, is saying, well, this is going to hurt China more than us, it's going to hurt other countries more than us, the United States is still guaranteeing that it's going to have to get involved militarily at the naval level to stop this. So obviously the United States is very concerned about this and should be, because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of just basic economics. This idea that if the global economy is shaken to its core, the United States is not going to be heavily affected. The United States has proven over and over and over again, if there's any shockwaves to the global economy, usually of its own making, it is one of the most heavily affected. It's actually China and governments like Russia that have the most flexibility in reorienting their economies to ensure, at the very least, stability and stable growth in the midst of immense challenges. We see this, of course, with Russia in being able to circumvent U.S. and European NATO sanctions. We see this with China, with what happened not only during COVID-19, but every single economic crisis that happens worldwide. China is the least affected. It doesn't go through these recessions, these cyclical recessions that U.S. and other Western European capital and market-dominated economies do. So, and Iran, of course, has been experiencing economic pain for a very long time. If the population is united behind it, which the population of Iran is very much united behind its government right now, especially around military affairs. If that's the case, then who's to say that Iran won't pull an economic card, even if just temporarily, to place pressure on the U.S. and, of course, Israel to stand down. And, of course, these Gulf countries that are so complicit, if not directly involved in not only the horrors of genocide in Gaza, but also this war. We know that despite the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Iran brokered by China not too long ago, a couple years ago, despite the fact that Saudi Arabia, UAE, UAE is a member of BRICS, Saudi Arabia is always flirting with it and whatnot. You have Egypt as a member of BRICS. Despite these hedges, we know that a lot of these governments in the Gulf, they want to see a different regime in Iran. They have facilitated a lot of the military and economic pain in the region in order to get rid of governments they see as unfriendly to their interests. And it just so happens that they see their interests as completely tied to the U.S. and Israel. So this is the complicated dynamic of West Asia that leads Iran to consider this kind of move. I don't know if this will be the primary move Iran makes. It would be a huge one, and it would be a gamble in some respects. But I believe Iran right now is saying all options are on the table. We see this with pulling out of the non-proliferation treaty, nuclear non-proliferation treaty. At this point, it probably should pull out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, as it's been exposed as nothing but a weapon for U.S. U.S. warmongering. That would probably, despite the diplomatic pain that might bring to Iran, nonetheless, it would be totally understandable if Iran did this. Hitting U.S. assets in the region, that's definitely on the table. And of course, I think this is the number one option in terms of what's not only doable, but likely to garner the most impact, which is continuing Operation True Promise 3 to its logical conclusion. I'm not an expert in Iranian military planning and strategy, but it's quite clear that there's an escalation ladder being climbed here. And that is already in the cards, already in motion, and has a huge impact and could be very decisive in how the United States and, of course, Israel, how they maneuver this war in the days and weeks to come.
And how others choose to respond, because it has been announced as well. We can talk about Yemen and Russia. Here we have it here. The Houthis warn U.S. ships will be targeted if Iran is attacked. I mean, this is not, this is not, you can't mess around with the Houthis. I mean, it's just a reality, right? So that's one example. And then there's another one here. Putin ally says countries now ready to supply Iran with nuclear weapons. So it says former Russian president, this is Dmitry, the deputy chairman of Security Council of Russia, said Sunday that Donald Trump has pushed the U.S. into another war and that countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. And again, this just means more escalation. Now, we don't know for sure if this is actually going to happen, but they are basically considering all different options. And we do have to remember that even though the West has demonized Iran, just as they've demonized, Gaza and Hamas and Lebanon, etc., you have to remember we are a small part of the world. There are many people in the world that stand with Iran. So we always have to remember that the West is relatively small.
Yeah, it's relatively small, and its economic influence is waning. It's not the juggernaut that it once was, albeit a juggernaut that was really baked in the blood of so many around the world, and domestically in the European and Western and U.S. Orbit. So at this point, the big motivating factor for why the U.S. is pursuing this trailblazing path of possible World War III assured destruction. I'm not going to say mutually because it's unclear whether it's mutually, but assured destruction when it comes to its war on multipolarity, now at the forefront being Iran, is because of its waning economic influence. It's because of what happens when countries like Iran, Russia, China, and others are not only able to circumvent sanctions, but are able to stand tall, develop their own paths of economic, political, and military relations. This is the big threat that is being seen around the world by the likes of people like Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Palantir, hell, Alex Karp, one of the founders and CEOs, former CEOs, I don't know if he's current, of Palantir, said quite blatantly, we are interested in a three-front war against Russia, China, and Iran. So the monopolies, the big corporations that really drive war, they see Iran as simply a territory that needs to be dismembered, its independence needs to be destroyed, and whatever is left of Iran needs to be put under the dominion of the U.S. and Western unipolar order. And that's the path that Donald Trump is pursuing now, of course, with Israel's interests being so much put to the forefront, because if Israel doesn't have its interests satisfied, well, the United States is going to be very lonely in that region. It already is getting lonelier and lonelier, and that is the big, I think, root cause here of all of this. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the Trump administration, so chaotic, some people say unpredictable. Really what it is lacking. It's really lacking any kind of so-called strategic vision, because that's the empire at the moment. There is no more war on terror, Cold War. There's nothing ideologically that can really ground the United States other than pillage, destroy, attempt to destroy, so that they can pillage. That's all that's on the minds of the American empire at this time, because they see the writing on the wall. They see the clock is ticking. They see their economy is shrinking. They see the dollar as being less and less relevant on the world stage, seeing more and more as a weapon by the rest of the world. And they also see that as the economies of the global south become more stable and strong, their abilities to defend themselves become stronger as well. That's just kind of how it goes. When you're able to be independent, you are also more able to fiercely defend those interests that keep you independent. And that is a huge red alert. It's a huge alarm that is firing for them right now. And here we are. We're at the precipice of a possible war with Iran. Whether it breaks out into full-scale conflict, I think time will tell, and it could happen very rapidly, or it could be a very long, protracted conflict that will also have its own kind of consequences for the U.S. empire.
Well said there, Danny. Danny, before you go, can you let everybody know? I think a lot of people here already watch you, but for those who don't, can you let everybody know where they can find your work?
Well, I appreciate that. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Geopolitics Haifong is the tag, but just search my name, Danny Haifong. You can find me there. And in the video description of all those videos, you can find all the places where you can follow me, support me. And I really appreciate the invitation, Sabby. As always, it's always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.